The first whisper of doubt crept in on a Thursday evening. I sat at our kitchen table, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, as Jessica breezed through the front door. Her hair was tousled, cheeks flushed, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. A smile that faltered slightly when her eyes met mine. "Hey, babe," she greeted me, dropping her purse on the counter. "Sorry I'm late. Work has been crazy lately." I nodded, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling unfurling in my gut. "No worries. I just thought we could grab dinner together, maybe catch up." Jessica's gaze darted away, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. "Actually, I'm not really hungry. I think I'm just gonna take a shower and head to bed early." She pressed a quick kiss to my cheek before disappearing down the hallway, leaving me alone with my thoughts. It had been like this for weeks now, Jessica coming home late, always with an excuse about work or errands. Our once easy conversations had become stilted, punctuated by long silences and unspoken tensions. I thought back to the early days of our relationship, when we'd stay up all night talking about our hopes and dreams. Jessica had been so passionate then, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she spoke about her career aspirations. She had always been driven, putting in long hours to climb the corporate ladder. But lately, something had shifted. It started with little things, a new perfume, a sudden interest in fitness, hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I tried to dismiss my suspicions, chalking it up to the stress of wedding planning and the pressures of her job. But the nagging sense that something was off persisted, growing louder with each passing day. I glanced down at my phone, scrolling through our recent text messages. Jessica's responses had become shorter, more distracted. Promises of date nights and weekend getaways were met with vague excuses about deadlines and meetings. The woman I had fallen in love with, the one who had always made me feel like the center of her world, seemed to be slipping away. As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our once vibrant life together, a realization began to take shape. The threads of trust and intimacy that had bound us together were starting to fray, unraveling with each unanswered question and evasive response. I knew I couldn't ignore the signs forever. Sooner or later, I would have to confront the truth that had been staring me in the face all along. But for now, I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was overthinking things. That the woman I loved, the one I had pledged my future to, couldn't possibly be capable of the deception my mind was conjuring. With a heavy sigh, I pushed myself up from the table and headed towards our bedroom, bracing myself for another night of restless sleep and unspoken doubts. Little did I know, the truth was about to come crashing down around me, shattering the illusion of the life I thought we had built together. The bedroom was quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of sheets as Jessica slipped beneath the covers. I lay beside her, my mind still reeling from the day's events. The distance between us felt palpable, a chasm I couldn't seem to bridge. I rolled over, my hand tentatively reaching out to touch her shoulder. "Jess," I whispered, my voice hoarse with unspoken emotions. "Can we talk?" She stiffened slightly beneath my touch, her back still turned to me. "Not tonight," she murmured, her voice muffled by the pillow. "I'm exhausted." I swallowed hard, gathering my courage. "I miss you," I said softly, my fingers trailing down her arm. "I feel like we haven't been connecting lately. Like you're pulling away." Jessica rolled over to face me, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "I'm not pulling away," she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. "I've just been busy with work. You know how demanding my job can be." I nodded, trying to choose my words carefully. "I know. But it feels like more than that. We used to be so close, and now—" I trailed off, unsure how to articulate the growing sense of unease that had taken root in my heart. Jessica sighed, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the comforter. "I'm sorry if I've been distant," she said, her voice softening. "It's just, with the wedding planning and everything, I've been feeling a lot of pressure." I reached out, cupping her cheek in my hand. "I'm here for you," I whispered, leaning in to press a soft kiss to her lips. "Let me help shoulder some of that burden." But as I deepened the kiss, Jessica pulled away, her body stiffening. Not tonight, she repeated, her voice taking on a firmer edge. You know the rule. I felt a flush of frustration wash over me. The no sleep until marriage rule had been Jessica's idea, a way to build anticipation and make our wedding night more special. At first, I had found it romantic, a testament to our commitment to each other. But as the weeks stretched on and the distance between us grew, it had begun to feel more like a barrier, a physical manifestation of the walls Jessica seemed to be erecting around her heart. Jess, I pleaded, my fingers tangling in her hair. I need you. I need to feel close to you. She shook her head, gently but firmly disentangling herself from my embrace. I'm sorry, she said, her voice tinged with regret. But we made a promise to each other. A promise to wait. I felt a flicker of anger spark in my chest, mingling with the hurt and confusion that had been building for weeks. A promise, I echoed, my voice hollow. Like the promise we made to be honest with each other? To always have each other's backs? Jessica's eyes widened, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, flashing across her face. What are you talking about? I sat up, running a hand through my hair in frustration. You've been distant, Jess. Secretive. Coming home late, always with an excuse. I feel like I don't even know you anymore. She shook her head, her expression hardening. You're being paranoid, she said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. I told you, it's just work. But even as the words left her lips, I could see the lie in her eyes. The way they darted away from mine, the almost imperceptible tremble in her voice. I knew at that moment that my suspicions had been right all along. That the woman lying beside me, the one I had pledged my heart to, was hiding something from me. Something that had the power to shatter the very foundation of the life we had built together. As Jessica rolled over, her back once again turned to me, I felt a cold sense of dread settle in the pit of my stomach. The threads of our relationship were unraveling faster than I could grasp them, and I knew that the truth, when it finally came to light, would leave nothing but bitter ashes in its wake. The morning sunlight filtering through the curtains felt like a mockery, a cruel juxtaposition to the heaviness in my heart. I watched as Jessica moved around our bedroom, getting ready for another day at the office. Another day of secrets and lies. I was thinking, I began, my voice carefully measured. Maybe we could have dinner tonight. Just the two of us. It's been a while since we've had a real conversation. Jessica paused, her hand hovering over her jewelry box. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, a crack in the facade she had so carefully constructed. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a cool, practiced smile. I can't tonight, she said, her tone apologetic but firm. I have a big project I need to wrap up. You know how demanding work can be. The words felt like a physical blow, a confirmation of the growing distance between us. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the bitter taste of disappointment. Of course, I said, my voice hollow even to my own ears. Work always comes first. Jessica's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation crossing her features. That's not fair, she said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. You know how hard I've worked to get to where I am. I can't just drop everything because you're feeling neglected. I flinched at her words, the truth of them hitting too close to home. I had always been proud of Jessica's ambition, her drive to succeed. But now, it felt like that same ambition was tearing us apart, pulling her further and further away from me with each passing day. I'm not asking you to drop everything, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I'm just asking for one night. One night to reconnect, to try to find our way back to each other. Jessica sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Jessica in her eyes, the one who had looked at me with such love and devotion, who had promised to stand by my side through every trial and triumph. But then her phone buzzed, shattering the fragile moment. She glanced down at the screen, her expression shifting into something unreadable. I have to go, she said, her voice brisk and businesslike. We'll talk later, okay? She pressed a quick, perfunctory kiss to my cheek before grabbing her purse and heading for the door. I watched her go, my heart sinking with each click of her heels against the hardwood floor. As the front door closed behind her, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. The woman I loved, the one I had pledged my future to, was slipping away from me with each passing day. And I didn't know how to stop it. I thought back to the early days of our relationship, when everything had seemed so simple, so clear. We had been so in love, so consumed by each other that nothing else mattered. But somewhere along the way, the cracks had begun to form, small at first, but growing wider and deeper with each passing year. Now, as I stood in the silence of our empty home, I couldn't help but wonder if those cracks had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. If the foundation we had built our life upon had been flawed from the start. I knew I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The distance, the secrecy, the growing sense of unease that had taken root in my heart. Something was wrong, and I needed to find out what it was before it destroyed everything we had worked so hard to build. But as I sat down at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth, when it finally came to light, would be more devastating than I could possibly imagine. The days stretched on, each passing hour a weight upon my shoulders. I tried to lose myself in work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Jessica, to the growing distance between us. The unanswered questions and unspoken doubts circled endlessly in my mind, a relentless whisper I couldn't quiet. As evening approached, I found myself drawn to Jessica's office building, an inexplicable pull I couldn't resist. I told myself I needed answers, a glimmer of clarity to pierce the fog of uncertainty that had enveloped our lives. But as I stepped into the lobby, my heart stuttered. Across the gleaming expanse of marble stood Jessica, her silhouette achingly familiar. And beside her, close enough to touch, was a man I didn't recognize. Time seemed to slow as I watched them, my breath catching in my throat. The man leaned in close, whispering something that elicited a soft laugh from Jessica. The sound echoed through the cavernous space, an eerie melody that sent a chill down my spine. Just before they disappeared into the elevators, Jessica glanced over her shoulder. For a moment, our eyes met, a fleeting connection across the chasm that had grown between us. Something flickered in her gaze, an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Guilt? Fear? Regret? The questions swirled faster, an endless torrent I couldn't stem. Who was this man? What were they doing together? Why had Jessica never mentioned him? I stood frozen, paralyzed by the weight of my own uncertainties. A part of me yearned to confront her, to demand the truth that had eluded me for so long. But another part, the part that still clung desperately to the tattered remnants of our love, hesitated. As I emerged into the cooling night air, my mind raced with possibilities. Each scenario played out like a movie reel, each more painful than the last. Was this the evidence of betrayal I had been dreading? Or was there an explanation, some innocent truth that would banish the shadows of doubt? I walked the streets aimlessly, the city lights blurring through the sheen of unshed tears. The life I had built with Jessica, the future we had dreamed of, suddenly felt as fragile as spun glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. But even as my heart ached with the weight of unspoken fears, I knew I couldn't let my suspicions consume me. I needed to talk to Jessica, to hear the truth from her own lips. Only then could I begin to untangle the twisted threads of our unraveling relationship. As I turned back towards home, a flicker of determination ignited within me. I would confront Jessica, but not with anger or accusation. I would approach her with an open heart, a willingness to listen and understand. Because beneath the layers of doubt and fear, I still believed in the love we had shared. And I refused to let that love crumble without a fight. I arrived home, my mind still reeling from the scene at Jessica's office. The image of her with that unknown man, their intimate body language, the sound of her laughter, it all played on an endless loop in my head, taunting me with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. I found Jessica in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "Hey," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of something I couldn't quite place. "I wasn't expecting you home so early." I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. I needed to see you, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. I needed to talk. Jessica set her glass down, her fingers lingering on the stem. She moved closer, her hips swaying with a deliberate, almost hypnotic rhythm. Talk? She murmured, her breath warm against my skin. I can think of better things to do than talk. She pressed herself against me, her hands sliding up my chest, her lips finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. I felt my body respond, even as my mind recoiled in confusion. This was the Jessica I remembered, the one who could set my soul on fire with a single touch. But it was also the Jessica who had been pulling away from me, keeping secrets, leaving me to question everything I thought I knew. I gently grasped her wrists, pulling back just enough to meet her gaze. Jess, wait, I said, my voice trembling slightly. We need to talk about what's been going on. About the distance between us, the late nights at work, She silenced me with a finger to my lips, her eyes darkening with an emotion I couldn't read. Shh, she whispered, her voice low and seductive. No more talking. I need you, baby. I need to feel you. Her lips crashed against mine, urgent and demanding. I felt myself getting lost in the taste of her, the familiar scent of her perfume clouding my senses. She tugged at my shirt, her fingers working the buttons with practiced ease. We stumbled towards the bedroom, a tangle of desperate limbs and ragged breaths. Jessica pushed me back onto the bed, her body hovering over mine, her eyes glinting with a hunger I hadn't seen in months. But just as I reached for her, just as I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other, she pulled away. No, she said, her voice suddenly cold, distant. We can't. The promise, remember? No sex before the wedding. I stared up at her, confusion and frustration warring in my chest. But you, I thought. Jessica shook her head, a cruel smile playing at the corners of her lips. You thought what? That I wanted you? That I needed you? She laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Oh, baby. You have no idea what I want or need. She climbed off the bed, straightening her clothes with a nonchalant air. I'm going out, she said, not even bothering to look at me. Don't wait up. The bedroom door slammed behind her, leaving me lying there, my body aching with unfulfilled desire, my heart shattered by her cruel rejection. As I heard the front door open and close, the finality of it echoed through the empty house. The woman I loved, the one I had pledged my life to, had just walked out on me, leaving me with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal on my tongue. I didn't know what game Jessica was playing, what twisted manipulation she was enacting. But as I lay there in the gathering darkness, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And when I did, there would be hell to pay. In the suffocating silence of our bedroom, I lay awake, staring at the shadows that danced across the ceiling. The space beside me, once filled with Jessica's warmth, now felt cold and empty, a tangible reminder of the growing void between us. I replayed the events of the evening in my mind, each moment searing itself into my memory. The way Jessica had pressed herself against me, her touch burning with a desperate hunger I hadn't felt in months. The cruel twist of her lips as she pulled away, leaving me aching and confused. But beneath the surface of her actions, I sensed something deeper, a truth that lingered just out of reach. The Jessica I knew, the woman I had fallen in love with, would never toy with my emotions so callously. There had to be more to the story, a missing piece of the puzzle that would make sense of the chaos swirling around us. As the night wore on, my mind drifted to the small details that had begun to accumulate, like grains of sand in an hourglass. The way Jessica's phone would buzz late at night, the screen lighting up with a name I didn't recognize. The faint scent of unfamiliar cologne clinging to her hair when she'd come home from work. The secretive glances exchanged with her boss during company events, a silent language I couldn't decipher. Each memory took on a new, insidious meaning, a sinister undercurrent that threatened to drag me under. Had I been blind to the signs all along? Had I been so naive, so desperate to believe in the fantasy of our perfect life, that I had ignored the cracks forming beneath the surface? I thought back to the early days of our relationship, when love had been a force that consumed us both. We had dreamed of a future together, of the life we would build side by side. But somewhere along the way, those dreams had begun to fracture, the once solid foundation of our love now riddled with doubts and insecurities. As the first light of dawn seeped through the curtains, I rose from the bed, my body heavy with exhaustion and unspent desire. I moved through the house like a ghost, the remnants of our life together mocking me from every corner. Jessica's favorite mug sat on the kitchen counter, a lipstick stain marring the rim. A stack of wedding magazines lay on the coffee table, their glossy pages filled with promises of happily ever after. Each object felt like a cruel reminder of the life I had thought we were building, the future that now hung in the balance. I knew I couldn't continue living in this state of uncertainty, my heart torn between hope and suspicion. I needed answers, a clarity that could only come from confronting the truth head-on. With a heavy heart, I began to plan my next move. I would retrace Jessica's steps, uncover the secrets she had been keeping. I would find out the identity of the man from her office, the one who seemed to hold such sway over her. But even as determination solidified within me, I couldn't shake the fear that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. The fear that the truth, once revealed, would shatter the illusion of the life we had built, leaving nothing but the bitter ashes of betrayal in its wake. As I stepped out into the cool morning air, I felt the weight of the unknown pressing down upon me. But I knew I had no choice but to push forward, to follow the twisted path that lay ahead. Because somewhere at the end of that path lay the answers I so desperately needed. And no matter how painful they might be, I knew I had to face them head-on. The morning light filtered through the cracks in the blinds, casting shadows across the remnants of our life together. I moved through the apartment in a daze, my fingers trailing over the frames of photographs that captured happier times, smiling faces, intertwined hands, the promise of a shared future. But the images felt distant now, like fading echoes of a life I could no longer grasp. With each passing day, the secrets between us grew, a chasm widening with every unanswered question and evasive response. I thought back to the previous evening, the way Jessica had pressed against me with a desperate hunger, only to pull away with cruel indifference. The emotional whiplash left me reeling, my heart torn between longing and resentment. I couldn't reconcile the woman I had fallen in love with, the one whose laughter had once filled these rooms with warmth, with the stranger who now wore her face. The small moments of intimacy we had once shared, a gentle touch, a knowing glance, had been replaced by a cold, calculated distance. As I stepped into the shower, the hot water cascading over my skin, I let the tears fall, mingling with the steam. The weight of unspoken fears pressed down upon me, suffocating in their intensity. I replayed the fractured memories in my mind, searching for the moment things had begun to unravel. Was it the missed dinner dates, explained away with flimsy excuses? The secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room? The lingering scent of unfamiliar cologne that clung to her skin? Each new realization felt like a tiny fissure in the foundation of our relationship, slowly eroding the trust we had spent years building. The doubts that had once been a quiet whisper now grew louder, impossible to ignore. I knew I couldn't continue living in the shadow of Jessica's secrets. The need for truth burned within me, a desperate hunger that gnawed at my very core. But even as I resolved to confront her, to demand the honesty I deserved, a small part of me feared what I might uncover. Because deep down, I understood that the truth had the power to shatter the fragile illusion of the life we had created together. It threatened to tear apart the carefully constructed facade, revealing the ugly reality that lurked beneath the surface. As I stepped out of the shower, the steam billowing around me, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. The face that stared back at me was haggard, the eyes haunted by the weight of unanswered questions. I knew that the path ahead would be painful, a journey fraught with heartache and disillusionment. But I also knew that I couldn't live with the alternative, a life built on secrets and lies, a love corroded by betrayal. With a heavy heart, I began to prepare for the confrontation that loomed on the horizon. I gathered the shattered pieces of my resolve, steeling myself for the inevitability of the truth. Because no matter how much it hurt, no matter how deeply it cut, I knew that I deserved more than the scraps of affection Jessica had been throwing my way. I deserved a love that was honest, a partnership built on the foundation of trust and mutual respect. And if the price of that truth was the destruction of the life we had built together, then so be it. I was ready to face the consequences, no matter how devastating they might be. The day unfolded with a surreal sense of detachment, each moment blurring into the next. I moved through the motions of my routine, my body present but my mind adrift in a sea of unanswered questions. I found myself at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen, the cursor blinking in accusation. The words I had once found solace in, the stories I wove with such care, now seemed hollow and meaningless in the face of my unraveling reality. Fragments of memories danced behind my eyelids, each one a jagged piece of the puzzle that was my life with Jessica. The whispered promises, the stolen kisses, the dreams we had whispered in the dark, they all took on a new, insidious meaning in the harsh light of betrayal. I thought back to the night Jessica had first suggested the "no sex before marriage" rule, her eyes shimmering with a coy innocence. At the time, I had found it endearing, a testament to her commitment to our relationship. But now, the memory twisted in my gut, a bitter reminder of the deception that lay beneath the surface. Had it all been a game to her? A cruel manipulation designed to keep me at arm's length while she pursued her own desires? The thought made bile rise in my throat, a searing ache that threatened to consume me whole. I pictured her in the arms of her married boss, their bodies entwined in a forbidden dance. The image seared itself into my mind, a branding iron of betrayal that left me gasping for air. How could she throw away everything we had built, every dream we had whispered in the dark, for a fleeting moment of passion? How could she look me in the eyes, day after day, and smile with such calculated deceit? The questions churned within me, a relentless tide that battered against the fragile shores of my sanity. I felt as though I was slowly unraveling, each thread of my being coming undone with every passing moment. And yet, beneath the anger and the hurt, a small part of me still clung to the hope that there was an explanation, some innocent truth that would wash away the stains of betrayal. Because the alternative, the realization that the woman I loved, the one I had pledged my life to, was capable of such cruelty, was a truth I wasn't sure I could survive. As the sun began its slow descent beyond the horizon, I leaned back in my chair, my eyes fixed on the fading light. The shadows lengthened, casting the room in an eerie half-light that mirrored the twilight of my own heart. I knew that the coming days would bring a reckoning, a confrontation that would tear apart the carefully constructed facade of our lives. The truth, once spoken, could never be unsaid, the damage never undone. But even as fear coiled in my gut, a flicker of determination sparked to life within me. I realized that no matter how much it hurt, no matter how deeply it cut, I needed to know the truth. I needed to look Jessica in the eyes and hear the words from her own lips, to see the reality of our relationship reflected in her gaze. Only then could I begin to pick up the shattered pieces of my life, to find a way forward in a world turned upside down. It wouldn't be easy, the road ahead was paved with heartache and uncertainty. But I knew that I owed it to myself, to the man I once was, to the dreams I had held so close to my heart. Because in the end, the truth was all I had left. And no matter how painful it might be, I knew that I had to embrace it with every fiber of my being. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I faced the gathering darkness. The battle for my future, for the very essence of who I was, had only just begun. The days bled into one another, a haze of uncertainty and unspoken fears. I moved through the motions of my life, my smile a carefully crafted mask hiding the turmoil that raged beneath the surface. Jessica's presence in our home had become a tangible reminder of the chasm that had grown between us. Her laughter, once a balm to my weary soul, now felt hollow and brittle, a discordant note in the symphony of our lives. I watched her from across the room, my eyes tracing the contours of her face, searching for a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with. But the shadows that danced behind her gaze, the secrets that lurked in the corners of her smile, remained just out of reach. We orbited around each other like distant stars, our paths crossing but never quite aligning. The silence between us was heavy with the weight of unspoken truths, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother the last embers of our love. I found solace in the small moments, the fleeting glimpses of normalcy that offered a temporary reprieve from the ever-present sense of unease. The brush of Jessica's hand against mine as we passed in the hallway, the scent of her shampoo lingering on the pillow beside me, each one a bittersweet reminder of the life we had once shared. But even in those moments of respite, the doubts that plagued me refused to be silenced. They whispered in the dark, their insidious tendrils snaking through my mind, poisoning every memory with the taint of suspicion. I thought back to the early days of our relationship, when love had been a force that consumed us both. The way Jessica's eyes had sparkled with mischief, the way her laughter had filled the spaces between my heartbeats. Those memories now felt like fading photographs, their edges worn and colors muted by the passage of time. Had it all been an illusion, a carefully constructed facade masking the cracks that had always lurked beneath the surface? Or had something fundamentally changed, a shift so subtle that I had failed to notice until it was too late? The questions haunted me, a relentless echo in the chambers of my mind. I knew that the answers lay just beyond the horizon, a truth that both terrified and beckoned me with equal measure. But even as the urgency of that truth pressed down upon me, I found myself hesitating, my feet poised on the precipice of revelation. A part of me clung to the fragile hope that perhaps, against all odds, there was an explanation that could salvage the remnants of our love. Because the alternative, the realization that the life we had built together was nothing more than a house of cards, destined to crumble at the slightest breeze, was a reality I wasn't sure I had the strength to face. And so, I continued my silent dance of avoidance, my heart torn between the desire for clarity and the fear of what that clarity might reveal. The days stretched on, each one a fragile tightrope suspended above an abyss of uncertainty. But even as I clung to the illusion of normalcy, I knew that the cracks in our foundation were growing deeper, the fissures spreading with every passing moment. It was only a matter of time before the truth would come crashing down, shattering the carefully constructed facade of our lives. And when that moment arrived, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning light seeped through the curtains, casting a muted glow across the bedroom. I lay there, my eyes tracing the familiar contours of the ceiling, as the weight of unspoken truths pressed down upon my chest. Beside me, Jessica stirred, her body shifting beneath the sheets. I felt the warmth of her skin, tantalizingly close yet impossibly distant. The space between us seemed to stretch into an infinite chasm, a void filled with the echoes of shattered promises. I tried to recall the last time we had truly connected, when the touch of her hand had sent electricity coursing through my veins. But the memories slipped through my grasp, like wisps of smoke dissipating in the early morning light. Rolling onto my side, I studied the slope of Jessica's shoulders, the way her hair splayed across the pillow like an inky river. In the soft light, she looked almost ethereal, a vision of the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But as I watched, I noticed the way her brow furrowed, the way her lips tightened almost imperceptibly. It was as if even in sleep, the weight of her secrets followed her, a burden she could never quite escape. I felt a sudden surge of longing, a desperate need to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. Reaching out tentatively, I brushed a strand of hair from her face, my fingertips grazing the softness of her cheek. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine a different reality, one where the trust between us had never been shattered, where the fabric of our love had remained intact. In that fleeting fantasy, we were the couple we had once been, our hearts beating in perfect synchronicity. But as quickly as the illusion had formed, it dissipated, replaced by the harsh truth of our fractured present. The secrets that Jessica harbored, the unanswered questions that hung heavy in the air, cast a shadow over the remnants of our love. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion wash over me, a bone-deep weariness that seemed to seep into my very marrow. The constant dance of doubt and suspicion, the unrelenting search for a truth I feared would break me, it had taken its toll, eroding the very foundation of my being. With a heavy sigh, I slipped out of bed, my feet carrying me to the window. The world outside was shrouded in a veil of mist, the streets below still and silent in the early morning hush. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass, my breath fogging the pain with each exhale. The chill seeped into my skin, a welcome respite from the feverish thoughts that raced through my mind. I knew that I could no longer live in this purgatory of uncertainty, suspended between the life I had once known and the reality that threatened to shatter it. The need for answers burned within me, a fire that consumed every waking moment. But even as I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation, a small part of me recoiled in fear. Because deep down, I understood that the truth had the power to destroy everything I held dear, to leave me adrift in the wreckage of a life I no longer recognized. And yet I knew that I couldn't continue to exist in this liminal space, haunted by the specter of betrayal. I owed it to myself, to the love I had once cherished, to unravel the twisted threads of deception that had ensnared us both. With a final glance at Jessica's sleeping form, I made my way out of the bedroom, my footsteps heavy with the weight of the path that lay ahead. The journey towards truth would be a treacherous one, fraught with heartache and painful revelations. But as I stepped into the pale light of dawn, I knew that there was no turning back. The only way forward was through the darkness, towards a future that held the promise of truth, no matter how devastating it might be. The coffee shop bustled with the morning rush, a cacophony of chatter and clinking porcelain. I sat at a corner table, my fingers wrapped around a mug of black coffee, the steam curling in lazy tendrils. Across from me, Jessica's best friend, Lila, stirred her latte thoughtfully. Her gaze met mine, a flicker of concern in her hazel eyes. "I don't know how to say this, Ethan," she began, her voice low and hesitant. "But I think there's something you should know." I leaned forward, my heart pounding a staccato rhythm against my ribcage. The intensity in Lila's tone, the way her fingers fidgeted with the napkin, it all pointed to a revelation I had been both dreading and desperately seeking. "It's about Jessica," Lila continued, her words measured and careful. "I've noticed some things lately. Things that don't add up." She paused, taking a sip of her latte as if to gather her thoughts. I waited, my breath held captive in my lungs. "She's been working late a lot, hasn't she?" Lila asked, her eyes searching mine for confirmation. "But the thing is, I ran into her boss's wife the other day. She mentioned that her husband had been working late too. Almost every night." The implication hung heavy in the air, a suffocating weight pressing down upon my chest. I felt the blood drain from my face, my fingers tightening around the mug until my knuckles turned white. Lila reached across the table, her hand resting gently on mine. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't want to believe it either. But the pieces just seemed to fit." She pulled out her phone, her fingers swiping across the screen. "There's something else. I didn't want to pry, but Jessica left her phone at my place last week. And when a message came through, I couldn't help but see." She turned the phone towards me, the screen displaying a string of texts. My eyes scanned the words, each one a dagger plunging deeper into my heart. "I miss you. Last night was incredible. When can I see you again?" The sender's name glared at me, a mocking confirmation of my deepest fears: David, Jessica's boss. I felt the world tilt on its axis, the ground beneath me crumbling into an abyss of betrayal. The air seemed to evaporate from my lungs, leaving me gasping for breath. Lila's voice drifted through the haze of my thoughts, a distant echo. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I debated whether to tell you, but I couldn't watch you live a lie." I nodded numbly, my mind reeling with the implications of her words. The life I had built with Jessica, the future we had planned together, it all lay shattered at my feet, the shards of broken promises cutting deep. I stumbled to my feet, mumbling a vague thanks to Lila as I pushed my way through the crowded cafe. The world around me blurred, the faces of strangers morphing into distorted masks of pity and disdain. I walked for hours, my feet carrying me through the city streets, my mind trapped in a loop of painful realizations. The signs had been there all along, glaring neon arrows pointing to the truth I had refused to see. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, I found myself standing outside our apartment building. The windows of our home glowed with a warm light, a cruel mockery of the life I had once believed in. With a heavy heart, I climbed the stairs, each step a leaden weight. The key turned in the lock, the sound echoing through the hollow chambers of my chest. And there, in the living room, stood Jessica, her face a mask of surprise and trepidation. The air between us crackled with the electricity of unspoken truths, the chasm of betrayal yawning wide. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that loomed ahead. The time for secrets and lies had passed. The moment of reckoning had arrived. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "About everything." The silence stretched between us, a chasm filled with unspoken truths and shattered illusions. Jessica stood before me, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and trepidation. In the soft glow of the living room lamp, the contours of her face seemed almost unfamiliar, as if I were seeing her for the first time through the lens of betrayal. "What's going on, Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard, my throat constricting around the words that threatened to spill forth. The weight of the evidence pressed against my chest, a suffocating burden that demanded release. "I know, Jessica," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. "I know about the late nights, the secret messages, the lies." Her face paled, a flicker of guilt passing behind her eyes before it was replaced by a carefully constructed mask of confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her words measured and calm. "I've told you, it's just work." A bitter laugh escaped my lips, the sound harsh and grating in the stillness of the room. "Work?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Is that what you call it? Sneaking around with your boss, betraying everything we've built together?" Jessica flinched as if struck, her composure cracking under the weight of my accusation. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think." I reached into my pocket, pulling out the phone Lila had shown me. The screen glowed with the damning evidence, the intimate messages that had shattered the illusion of our life together. "Then explain this," I demanded, thrusting the phone towards her. "Explain the texts, the stolen moments, the secrets you've been keeping from me." Jessica's gaze fell to the screen, her eyes widening as they scanned the words that sealed her betrayal. A sob caught in her throat, her shoulders shaking with the force of it. "I'm sorry," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." The words hung in the air between us, a fragile offering of repentance. But the sting of betrayal, the ache of shattered trust, couldn't be soothed by mere apologies. I sank onto the couch, my legs giving way beneath me. The room seemed to tilt and spin, the foundations of my world crumbling beneath the weight of Jessica's confession. "How long?" I asked, my voice a broken whisper. "How long have you been lying to me?" Jessica's gaze met mine, her eyes swimming with tears and regret. "A few months," she admitted, her words heavy with shame. "It started as a flirtation, a harmless distraction from the stress of wedding planning. But it spiraled out of control." Each word was a dagger plunging into my heart, a vivid reminder of the life I had believed in, the love I had cherished above all else. The realization that it had all been a carefully constructed facade, a house of cards built on a foundation of lies, left me reeling. I closed my eyes, the memories of our life together flashing behind my eyelids like a bitter montage. The laughter, the shared dreams, the promises whispered in the dark, all of it now tainted by the poison of betrayal. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I whispered, my voice raw with the depth of my pain. "You've broken something precious, something I thought was unbreakable." Jessica's sobs filled the room, a haunting symphony of regret and despair. But even as my heart ached for the love we had lost, I knew that there was no going back. The threads of our life together had been severed, the tapestry of our future unraveled by the choices she had made. As I sat there, the weight of the truth pressing down upon me, I realized that the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. The life I had once envisioned, the dreams Jessica and I had shared, lay shattered at my feet. But even amidst the pain and the betrayal, I knew that I had to find a way to pick up the pieces, to forge a new path from the ashes of our broken trust. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, filled with moments of doubt and despair. Yet, as I looked up at Jessica, her face etched with the agony of her own mistakes, I knew that the first step towards healing lay in the truth we had finally spoken aloud. The secrets that had festered in the shadows, the lies that had eaten away at the very core of our love, could no longer hold sway over us. In that moment, as the weight of our shared pain hung heavy in the air, I understood that the road to redemption began with a single choice, the choice to face the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. The weight of Jessica's confession hung heavy in the air, a suffocating presence that seemed to leach the very oxygen from the room. I sat motionless on the couch, my mind reeling with the implications of her words, each one a shard of glass piercing the fragile remnants of my heart. Across from me, Jessica stood trembling, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as if in supplication. Tears streaked her face, carving glistening paths through the mask of betrayal that had shattered the illusion of our life together. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice raw with the depth of my pain. "How could you throw away everything we had, everything we built together?" Jessica flinched as if struck, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm sorry," she choked out, the words barely audible above the ragged sound of her breathing. "I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." A bitter laugh escaped my lips, the sound harsh and grating in the stillness of the room. "A mistake?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Is that what you call it? Betraying our love, our trust, our future together?" I rose to my feet, my legs unsteady beneath me as I paced the length of the room. The floorboards creaked under my weight, a mocking echo of the life I had once believed in. "I gave you everything, Jessica," I said, my voice trembling with the force of my emotions. "My heart, my dreams, my unwavering loyalty. And you repaid me with lies and deceit." Jessica's shoulders shook with silent sobs, her hands twisting the fabric of her shirt as if seeking absolution in the folds. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. But please, Ethan, try to understand." I whirled to face her, my eyes blazing with the intensity of my anger and despair. "Understand what?" I demanded, my voice rising with each word. "That you chose your own selfish desires over the love we shared? That you were willing to sacrifice everything we had for a fleeting moment of passion?" The words hung in the air between us, a chasm of betrayal and heartbreak that seemed to stretch into eternity. In the silence that followed, the weight of our shared history pressed down upon us, a suffocating reminder of the life we had once dreamed of building together. I closed my eyes, the memories of our love flashing behind my eyelids like a bitter montage. The first time we met, the spark of connection that had ignited between us. The late-night conversations, the shared laughter, the dreams whispered in the dark. All of it now tainted by the poison of Jessica's betrayal. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't live with the constant doubt, the knowledge that every moment we shared was built on a foundation of lies." Jessica's eyes widened, a flicker of panic passing behind the veil of tears. "Ethan, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "We can work through this. We can find a way to heal, to rebuild what we had." But even as the words left her lips, I knew that there was no going back. The trust that had once been the bedrock of our relationship lay shattered at our feet, the fragments too jagged and brittle to piece back together. "No, Jessica," I said, my voice heavy with finality. "We can't. You've broken something precious, something I thought was unbreakable. And now, I have to find a way to pick up the pieces and move forward. Without you." The words hung heavy in the air, a death knell for the life we had once shared. Jessica's face crumpled, her body folding in on itself as if the weight of her own guilt had finally become too much to bear. I turned away, my heart aching with the finality of my decision. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, a journey into the unknown without the comfort of the love I had once believed would last a lifetime. But even amidst the pain and the betrayal, I knew that I had to find the strength to forge ahead, to build a new life from the ashes of our broken dreams. The road to healing would be long and arduous, filled with moments of doubt and despair. Yet, as I stepped towards the door, my hand resting on the handle, I understood that the first step towards redemption lay in the truth we had finally spoken aloud. The secrets that had festered in the shadows, the lies that had eaten away at the very core of our love, could no longer hold sway over us. With a final glance at Jessica, her face etched with the agony of her own mistakes, I pushed open the door and stepped out into the unknown. The future stretched before me, a blank canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of my own resilience and strength.